I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to 2015. Hope everybody had good holidays. I certainly, as one member, enjoyed the time off, so but now back to it. I will open tonight's meeting and ask if anyone on the board has any public comment this evening. No. A couple of announcements. First, from the Lunenburg Fire Department, they are now accepting and issuing burning permits online. So you can go to the town's website and on the fire department's area of the website and register for your burning permit. Once the burning season begins, you can log in to the site, and you have to obviously, or maybe not so obviously, tell the fire department when you are going to be burning. And by after 8 a.m., the site will tell you whether the burning is allowed that day. If you can, then you can put it in your activation code. So there is the whole process. Permits can be activated each day between 8:30 and noon, and the registration for permits is available now, but please remember that burning season doesn't start until January 15th and goes to May 1st. So no permits can be activated until then. For persons with limited computer access, permits can be registered at the fire station Mondays through Fridays from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And permits can also be activated by calling the fire station's number, non-emergency number, 978-582-4155 between 8:30 a.m. and noon each day during the burning season. So if you have any questions, certainly check out the website or call the fire department for more clarification. Also from the fire department, as many of you already know, there's a severe weather alert going to be hitting here in the next 2 days. And so there are an advisory and some summary announcements and warnings from the fire department about ways to deal safely with the cold weather, especially when it comes to space heaters, wood, coal, and pellet stoves, and then, of course, in conjunction with those, smoke alarms and carbon monoxide alarms, making sure they are working. So, again, this is posted at Town Hall, and it's posted on the website as well, I believe. Mm-hmm. So please be aware of that. And one additional comment I would make is that it's a good time of year with these severe alerts to, if you have neighbors that are housebound, to maybe you want to check in on them, call them to make sure if somebody is, a senior, limited mobility, somebody recovering from a surgery, etc., to check in on them and make sure everything's okay, since they may not be able to get out or make the contact on their own. So that time of year again. Any public comment from the public today? Seeing none. We will go right to the proclamation of Purple Heart Town.
Do you want me to read it?
No, I'll read it.
Okay.
I was just gonna wait for the official one. So this is a proclamation from the Board of Selectmen, or requesting the Board of Selectmen sign. Purple Heart Town. Whereas the people of the town of Lunenburg have great admiration and the utmost gratitude for all the men and women who have selflessly served their country and this community in the armed forces for the good of all. And whereas contributions and sacrifices of the men and women from Lunenburg who served in harm's way in the armed forces have been vital in maintaining the freedom and the way of life enjoyed by our citizens. And whereas citizens of our community have been killed in action while serving in the armed forces and have been posthumously awarded the Purple Heart for their ultimate sacrifice, and whereas citizens of our community have been awarded the Purple Heart for their bodily sacrifice of being wounded in action while engaged in combat, and whereas the Purple Heart is the oldest American military decoration in present use and was created as the badge of military merit on August 7, 1782 in Newburgh, New York, by General George Washington. Initially, it was made of purple cloth, shaped as a heart with the word merit sewn upon it. And whereas the heritage it represents is sacred to those who know the price paid to wear the Purple Heart, and whereas August 7th is nationally recognized as Purple Heart Appreciation Day, now therefore be it proclaimed that we, the town of Lunenburg, will recognize August 7th annually as Purple Heart Day, and urge the people and organization of Lunenburg to display the American flag as well as other public expressions of recognition of our Purple Heart recipients. In witness whereof, we have hereunto set our hands and caused the official seal of the town of Lunenburg, Massachusetts, to be affixed. Tom Alonso, Chair; Paula Bertram, Vice Chair; Jamie Toll, Clerk; Robert Ebersol, Phyllis Luck, members. I would entertain a motion on signing the proclamation.
A motion to sign the proclamation.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Okay, it's 7 p.m. We have an appointment with Jeff Mendoza, Chair of the Agricultural Commission, to review proposed market rules. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jeff Mendoza of 162 Lancaster Avenue, and I'm currently serving as chair of the Agricultural Commission. And this is Renee Trakemas, a Agricultural Commission member
520 Page Street, laryngitis.
with laryngitis. So, basically, the first thing I'd like to discuss is the Lunenburg Farmers Market, which started about 4 years ago and seemed to be growing in popularity among townspeople and vendors. And as of this last season, we saw a drastic decline in attendance from both customers, people passing through town, and also vendors. Several of the vendors I know from other markets and have had discussions with them. And one of them promised she'd give it another try this coming season. But we feel on the Agricultural Commission that Lunenburg and its farming heritage, again as evidenced by the town seal, that the farmers markets right now are very popular in a lot of communities. The Westminster market is one of the largest in the area, and it seems to us that Lunenburg should be able to follow suit. One of the things that we think is happening when you come into town, Harper's Farm has farm stands just on the outskirts of town. We also have Lanny's, which is available. There are a lot of farm stands around where people can get produce. And what we'd like to do is encourage diversity. If any of you have gone to the Shirley Farmers Market, there are people selling textiles and a lot of things in addition to just produce. And we would like to try to get the Lunenburg market to be more diverse and offer a lot of different things, where vegetables we want to have, but they're available at a lot of places already. And we feel that the current regulations require some modification. They are restrictive compared to a lot of surrounding communities. In discussions over the past several months with the town manager, there seems to be a recollection that when the selectmen authorized the farmers market, that there was a sentiment, again, I wasn't there at the time, but people seem to remember discussion of when and if there's an agricultural commission, that the farmers market would fall under the direction of that commission, which would be in line with Westminster and Bolton, I believe. Several of the nearby communities run them that way. And part of the idea of that is that if there is, if someone, for example, applies and is denied access or denied participation as a vendor, rather than one person being the market manager, for example, deciding, there would be a group of people who could decide. Westminster offers something that I actually like very much, which is a jury, which has the market manager, a couple members from their AgCom, and a couple of citizens who are not particularly involved with the market in case someone is denied or if a dispute arises, to try to offer a fair solution. In our AgCom meetings, this has been discussed at length, and we would like to ask the selectmen if the farmers market, now that the Agricultural Commission exists and is up and running, could be under our oversight, and if that is something that can happen, then we would modify the existing regulations to hopefully be more inclusive. We feel that limiting it just to strictly farm products, being produce, is keeping the market small. And by keeping it small, I've been there as a musician and watched people drive by, and they don't see much happening, and they drive on. And again, I don't know if any of you have driven past the Shirley Market. When you drive by, there's a whole, there's 6 or 8 or 10 tents set up, and there's a happening. There's all the cars parked, and when you drive by, it looks like something interesting and something worth stopping for. The Westminster Market is, or at least last year, was the biggest one in this area. And it's the same sort of thing when you drive up to Academy Hill, which is where their bandstand is. They have 2 rows of 11 or 12 tents on either side. There's people everywhere. They actually there's usually people with rabbits and llamas and that sort of thing. There's kids running around. It's a whole, it's a whole community event and worth traveling to. One of the things too that I've found personally, as a musician, the farmers markets are great places to play. They're casual, they're fun. This particular market, it's easy for me because I live so close, but it's sort of like I'll wake up on a Sunday and throw my guitar in the back of the truck and drive up, and if nobody else is playing, then I will play. And if someone else is there, that person and I can discuss who's going to do what. Most of the other markets have a schedule. The other thing that's good about that is you can post it online, and if there are special events, which the Westminster Market has, they have an Oktoberfest. They have a fair and share, which is a big festival day, and so that helps to draw more people in. And we just feel that we, as a group, can do more to promote it than the way it's being run currently. So that was basically, I'm here to ask your thoughts on it, or if it's something that we can move on. And January is the perfect time. We'll have time to get it together and figure out how to go with this. And hopefully, if this is something that the Board of Selectmen are interested in supporting, we can try to bring some of these vendors that we've lost, because we've actually lost several vegetable vendors, a jewelry vendor, a baker. A lot of people have just said there's not enough traffic, to make it worth packing all your stuff up and coming out to Lunenburg for a Sunday. So that's where we're at with the market. And
I will open it up to the board.
The first question that I have is, and it was some time ago and I don't really remember, and I don't know whether it's for you or for the town manager, but the question that I have is, I recall the initial request to have a farmer's market, and we named an individual to serve as the market manager. Now, as far as regulations, how were they adopted? Who were they adopted by? What was that process?
It's my understanding that the regulations were adopted by the Board of Health. That they were, originally this came as a request to use town property, and then we got into the need for to supply electricity. There was a request from one of the vendors, could we use electricity from the Ritter building, and got into prepared foods. We did a little bit of research at some of the surrounding towns who was overseeing these things, and we found that it was either an agricultural commission, board of health, or board of selectmen, and it really just depended on which community we looked at. And then it got kicked over to the board of health, and a set of regulations were prepared, and it's my understanding that they were adopted by the board of health.
So there was no action by the Board of Selectmen relative to these regulations, or at least I don't recall any.
Well, we offered the, excuse me for interrupting,
Yeah.
we certainly, we were requested to use town land
Right,
for.
right, but as far, right, I understand that, but
Because at
as
that
far as the
point-
regulations.
Yes,
we
the
didn't-
regulations, because at that point, it was strictly a food, it was a food marketplace, and so
Right.
therefore, it was felt without, short of an agricultural commission at the time, that if things were going to fall under the food area of marketing, that it made sense, since obviously, no matter how we do it now, how we structure it now, there is still a food component that the Board of Health will have the jurisdiction over. So that's, I think, why, and also the marketing manager worked for the Board of Health as well, so that it just made it easier to do that.
Right, and I guess my only point is, I don't remember the Board of Selectmen ever being involved with reviewing or adopting those regulations. I think it was done by the Board of Health.
Yeah, I think
correct?
they were presented to you in concept, and there was a decision made that it should go to the Board of
Okay,
Health. Yeah.
okay.
And I'm not sure that when we talk about regulations, that would be more Board of Health component as opposed to how to run, how to market, other things like that, that the Agricultural Commission is proposing a broader policy, procedures, things like that. So
Right.
I think the Board of Health will still have certain requirements as a Board of Health, and then there are other things that are not under their jurisdiction that fall under the farming component of the.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I think that any food service operation, I know that any food service operation requires the oversight and permitting of the Board of Health, so that certainly would remain, the case. But given the information that we have as far as expanding the market and changing the market with the creation of the Agricultural Commission, I think it makes sense to revisit those regulations and have them under the supervision of the Agricultural Commission. My only question is how that works as far as the adoption of the regulations of the Board of Health, because I know the Board of Health is an elected body with different jurisdiction than the Board of Selectmen, so I'm just questioning. I don't know that we can negate their regulations.
I think you need to work cooperatively
Right,
to
right.
come up with a new process.
Right.
And I think this is a great natural progression for where we are at, and part of it being getting the Agricultural Commission involved. And certainly, having watched the Agricultural Commission work with other people already during this process, certainly looking to them to work with the Board of Health to do an orderly transfer. But I wholeheartedly support that the Agricultural Commission should be in charge of this process and to keep the town manager informed. And if we need to adopt anything, we can certainly do that, but I'm not sure if you actually need regulations beyond operating guidelines that would come under our jurisdiction. You'd still have to have Board of Health oversight, which we would not be involved with.
For food service.
Food
It would
service
not be
portions,
Board of Health oversight of the market itself.
That's correct.
Right. The sale of foods is obviously under the jurisdiction of the Board of Health. There's no denying that. But clothing and musicians and any other things that are not food oriented, obviously, were not initially proposed when the farmers market was first proposed, and therefore, and there was no agricultural commission to even think about putting it under. So to me, I agree with both Mrs. Bertram and Mr. Ebersol that I think your commission would be the perfect organization to run that, and to run the marketing side of it. I mean, obviously, the component that has to do with the healthy and safe sale of food products will still be under the Board of Health. We should look, you as a commission, should get their regulations, whatever they have now, and I would write a superset of them that included how to market it, how to get traffic to it, how to get non-food vendors there, as you have explained. I think all those things that you said, and without repeating what they've said, I think make a natural sense. It's a natural evolution, and I'd love to see it larger. I mean, I'd love to see it be thriving. So,
Have you approached the Board of Health regarding transferring the regulations to the Agricultural Commission?
We have discussed the existing regulations originally within the past year, and from the inception of the Agricultural Commission, we were under the impression that there were no regulations, because people that had come to me had said they had requested regulations and were not given them. And from our founder and original chairman, we were under the impression that there weren't regulations, and so we had adopted a proposal to discuss. And when we invited the current market manager, she brought the regulations. This was several months back to one of our meetings, and this was the first time that I had seen them. And the way most of the other communities that, at least that I'm aware of, that I've looked at their regulations, generally what happens is the Agricultural Commission, or in one case, they have a green task force, and their farmers market falls under that group. Whichever group is overseeing the market, the regulations generally require that any food vendor have the appropriate resale Board of Health certificates from their community, and that's all kept on file. So the Board of Health is definitely completely involved with the sale of food, but it seems generally, because the Board of Health in the community isn't running the actual market, that the regulations for the market are usually drafted by whatever the governing body is, and then the Board of Health regulates what applies to them,
makes sense.
sort of alongside it.
And to be very clear, I have no recollection, okay, I mean, this happened 4 years ago. I have no recollection that we ceded the authority to anybody.
Right.
I think that because they were selling food,
Right. It's
clearly,
natural.
Board of Health. I don't know that anybody ever wrote or saw any regulations, and certainly none that I can recall that were approved or really endorsed by any body elected or appointed. So I think there were general ones by the market manager,
Right.
who, to make things flow more efficiently, drafted some. But I don't think they were endorsed by any one particular appointed body.
That I don't know.
That's my impression, but I would check with that, because that would be the first stop. If there are none that were endorsed by one, then I would, as a board, since you're an appointed body by this board, if we cannot find any regulations that say it's under the jurisdiction totally of the Board of Health, then I'd be the first one to want to make sure it gets put under your supervision.
I think Jeff and I have talked about this probably for at least a year, and when we first started talking about it, I had forgotten about the regulations, and I think at some point during one of the conversations it was mentioned that the market manager said that there were regulations, but it's my understanding that she has said that the Board of Health has adopted them.
Right.
Yeah, so,
said that.
I mean, that's where my information is coming from, that staff member.
And
has
this goes
said
back
that.
to my original question, because I don't recall, and perhaps it happened, it was a long time ago, but I don't recall us ever reviewing any regulations. I remember a question coming up about the sale of meat specifically at the market, which had been denied, and we had a lengthy discussion that it should be allowed, provided that they had the necessary permits from the Board of Health for the resale of that food. At no time did I recall seeing specific regulations that allowed that particular sale not to be allowed, and that's my only recollection of dealing with the market itself or regulations. So, I guess that's one of my points, is what specifically do the Board of Health regulations say? When were they adopted, and do they specifically relate just to food service, or do they go beyond that? And if they do, how do we change that?
And I would question whether, if they go beyond food safety, whether the Board of Health had the authority to adopt, regulate that type of thing. So it would be helpful to get a copy of what has since been provided to you
Because
through the town manager. And
I do have a copy of the current regulations these were what the manager brought to our meeting.
When do they say they were adopted?
I don't think
All
it's
that
noted.
all that this says is it's the market application and policies for 2014. And other than that, it doesn't say.
Do we need a motion on this, or is the sense of the board enough to say, I mean, other members
I
haven't
think
spoken
the only thing
yet.
we can do right now that I would request is what has already been requested, which is before we take any action, which we may or may not need to later on, it'd be nice to know where we are as far as, again, adopted regulations. There are regulations that people put in place because somebody was running the farmer's market, and that's a far cry different than if an elected board adopted things, which is also far cry different than an elected board who may go beyond the bounds of what their scope of authority was. I don't believe anything that I can remember ever was addressed beyond food, ever.
Right.
If something is in those beyond food,
Well,
it would be interesting.
Yeah, for example, there is the thing that actually is most notable to us that seems to be very different than any other farmers market regulations that we've looked at is that these policies require that farm producers must file a Schedule F on their taxes. And what that serves to do is any backyard producers of anything are excluded. And it seems to us that we're, again, when I was looking at the dilution that we have with so many farm stands around, those are the people that are filing the Schedule Fs on their taxes already. And so to bring in more people, you know, we feel that we want the backyard people. We want the people who are doing the unusual things and the people who maybe aren't farming professionally. That's what the farmers, markets seem to be mostly for. Where, you know, in our case we have, you know, Lanny's is the prime example, or Dick's Market Stand. I mean, these guys are really producing, you know, farm product, and they're selling it. They have their stores. We're looking, you know, we think that the farmers market, you know, in addition to non-farm items, would be a good place for people who are really into gardening and farming, but are doing it, you know.
I understand exactly what you're looking for,
Yeah.
and I think what we,
But I mean,
all
those
we need
sorts
to
of
know
things-
from those people,
Yeah.
I'm not a farmer, and so I don't know if the Board of Health had a specific reason. Maybe they are the ones who put that stipulation in, because that means that somebody's being overseen by them, whereas a backyard farmer may not. But, I mean, I don't know. So obviously, for anything that's food-related, we're going to have to get the seal of approval from the
Right.
Board of Health. What I'm saying is that to give the authority of running the market to the AgCom, with everything else excluding the health permit, so the Board of Health approval on food products should be given to you, seems to be the direction I would like and other members of the
And
board
I
would
would-
like.
I
But we
would
want to make
agree.
sure that this authority was not already somehow, I don't recall it, but somehow not granted to another body before we do that.
Is that something for us to investigate?
I
or
think it's something for the town manager and for your, I think you should put a written request in
Okay.
to the Board of Health, saying if you are running the farmers market, you want to see the regulations that were adopted and when they were adopted, and we'll look at the same thing. I mean, we don't want it to be adversarial, we just
No, not at
want to be
all.
able to produce them. I mean, it's part of the record keeping that we should be able to come up with them. And I know when this was first brought up, a large part of it was informally done. And I think that's what makes this step important, because if that was never formalized, then we need to do that.
I would go a step further. I think we should send a letter to the Board of Health noting that with the creation of the Agricultural Commission, the Board of Selectmen support turning over the management of the farmers market to the Agricultural Commission, and request that, you know, information relative to the regulations that may have been adopted by the Board of Health be forwarded to the Board of Selectmen and the Agricultural Commission, as well as the dates that they were adopted. I mean, I would like to, a formal letter from this board.
That makes sense.
I would support that action.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Do we need a motion to do that?
I would make that as a motion.
Okay.
Could you
Next
restate
time.
that letter?
So we have a motion to have written by the town manager to the Board of Health such a letter, as summarized by Mrs. Bertram. Do I have a second?
I would second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So there, so we will send that,
Okay.
and I guess you should.
And
CC
Carrie and I can, yeah, we
CC
can
the
follow
ag
up.
as well.
I will do
So you don't
that.
have to do anything at this point. We'll just request it.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
If they write back and I mean, what would be interesting to request in that letter is if we request, do they support this? Because if they support it and they can take a vote on it to turn over the marketing of the market to you and your commission, then that makes this a whole lot easier.
And we can certainly incorporate within that letter that we understand that all food service permits must be duly obtained from the Board of Health.
And that's, of course, not even,
Right.
we can put it in
We
there,
can-
but
we
it's
can put
really
it
by
in
law,
just to-
we
right.
have to do it anyway.
Right, but I think it makes sense just to put it in, recognizing their authority.
Yep.
Well, thank you for that. And if I could, while I have your ears, since we were appointed by you guys and we're at a point where it's been a year plus, I just have some questions that I'd like to ask you about the Agricultural Commission, if there's time.
Sure.
They'll be quick. One of the things I wanted to let you know is that we applied for and received a $450 grant toward putting up right to farm community signs. Lancaster has them, Bolton has them, a lot of towns have them. And we just aren't entirely sure on what the procedure is. Do we go directly to the DPW to see about getting some of these signs put up? If you come into Lancaster, they have them on existing.
I would probably say that you should make proposals of where you want to place them to this board,
Okay.
and then at that point, with our approval, we would send them to the DPW for installation.
We had discussed that sort of roundabout with no conclusions because we didn't know.
Right.
So, okay, we'll do that. Obviously, as part of the farmers market, we want to advertise, which of course costs money. And when this board was originally created, the founder didn't think that we would need money for anything. And we are starting to see that we think we would like to have money. And we would like to request a budget for advertising and for promotion of the farmers market and for promotion of agriculture in general in town. And as part of that request, we also are not sure if and how we could receive donations if people are interested. I know in Pepperell they have a Friends of the AgCom sort of organization that people who want to support it can send money through that way. I don't know if that's something that, if that's the direction to go in, or if we can just receive checks. I'm not sure how that works, and I don't necessarily need an answer to that right now, but that's something that we've been thinking about. We were looking at, a small budget of maybe $1,000 would go a very long way with the sort of thing we want to do: yard signs, banners.
Your next
whatnot.
meeting
Our next meeting will be the 15th
of this month.
of this month.
I would recommend that at that meeting, you put together some kind of informal budget about how you would propose using the $1,000,
Okay.
and then submitting that to the town manager and CCing the board as an official budget request.
All right.
And then I think on to donations, we have a donations policy where people can donate to the town for a specific purpose. And
Well,
then-
we can set up a gift account for the Ag Commission, which I think is probably a lot more reasonable than you trying to establish a Friends of
Right.
the
Right,
the
that
Ag
seemed
Commission.
like a whole
yeah.
extra,
Right.
Yeah.
situation.
So if anybody wants to make a donation, in the short term, it can be made to the town agricultural commission gift account. We can set something up for you.
All right, the other question we had talked about, I talked to the town manager about a website potentially, or a link from the town website to an AgCom website. And at the time, there was discussion of the town website being reworked in some way, and we were sort of holding off, and I didn't know if that was still happening, or if we should proceed with Steve. Is it still Steve Malandrinos?
Yes.
If we should proceed with him to get so that we can, have a you can go to the town website, you can get to the Agricultural Commission.
That's the way I would envision
I think
it
you
being.
should
It
start.
should be under the same umbrella. It shouldn't be a link to an outside site, no.
There had been talk of some changes potentially to the town site. So
But
we
I
were-
think
we
this
had
would be
sort
a
of
good
waited.
starting
Well,
point.
changes or not, it should be under
It
the
should be,
umbrella of
right.
the town.
Okay.
Right.
It shouldn't be a link to an external site.
And the last question I have is a conflict of interest question that was raised to me. And where we're looking to provide a retail space for farmers, for people who produce whatever it is they produce, and in my particular case for musicians, granted, mostly I get paid in bread and carrots, which is great, but at the same time, we have this 5-member commission, and each of us have some sort of interest in potentially the farmer's market. And I just didn't know how that worked, because I don't know who would be on the Agricultural Commission who wasn't a farmer. One of these days will try to find out how many agricultural commissions in the state have chairmen who aren't farmers. I'm just curious. If I'm the only one, I might be. But at the same time, I still have an interest, although small financially. There still is this this question that was brought to me. And it seems to me that any of us who are serving on these boards, as you guys all know, it takes an awful lot of time. And if you weren't interested in some way in something,
So
why would you do
what
it?
conflict of interest is
well,
being
I'm
brought
just
up to
wondering
you?
if it's seen as a conflict of interest to say we have a potential farmer who would come to a farmer's market that's sort of being overseen by the board that farmer sits on. Is that seen as is that a conflict of interest?
It's a
I could
very
see
good
how
question.
it could be.
It could be, and part of the discussion is whether you have a personal interest that you could have as opposed to a general interest for everybody.
Mhm.
And so it goes to, on the process is just as important as what you're doing as a policy. So if you're making decision who's going to be there, you're going to perform versus somebody else is performing,
Mhm.
and you're going to get paid, then you have a financial interest, and it could be a concern. So there has to be other agricultural commissions that have dealt with this, and you've got a pretty good support from the Farm Bureau, and I don't know if they address the conflict of interest in their manual or not. And then certainly the Ethics Commission is open to discussions,
Mhm.
but it's usually a good idea to have, what could you procedurally do to avoid what you think might be a conflict? And if you can come up with that and then talk to the Ethics Commission saying, does this fly, then it will withstand.
Right. I would consult first and foremost, I would consult with the State Ethics Commission and ask them what they are. Now, in your case, actually, I think it's actually easily remedied if you're worried about who gets to hire the musicians, because obviously, unless you're going to have dueling bands or dueling folk artists, you're only going to have one, whereas, in a farmer's market, if you're selling grown vegetables and fruit, you can have as many people as you want, so it's not exclusionary.
Right.
So in your case, since you're the only one of the commission who's playing, you could say that the decision about who plays is voted on by everybody but yourself. You would recuse yourself from any musical, musician choices, right? So it would be a simple enough thing if that's of course, your initial point is if everybody's a farmer on the farmer's market and farmers, sell their wares at farmers markets, by definition, almost everybody's at a conflict of interest, which means, of course, by the same token, really nobody's at a conflict of interest because everybody's equal. Everybody's going to try to sell their own things. It's really when one takes advantage of one, and that's why talking with the Ethics Commission is really important. Say what your feelings are.
And it's very easy to do. Just call the number that's on the state website, and someone will get back to you within 24 hours and just talk about the potential scenario and give you some advice.
And
So-
your conversation with them is your conversation with them, all right? So you don't have to explain that to anybody. You can say you spoke with them, and they may have you file, a disclosure with the town clerk, which is, another step, saying, hey, listen, I acknowledge that I'm providing the service while on the commission, But I've been told that I really, by right, don't have to recuse. You can recuse yourself from anything, even if you don't, even without a state ethics commission decision, if you felt so strongly that, you know what, this is clearly a conflict. But nobody can coerce you into recusing yourself.
Another conflict could have been with that requiring a Schedule F farm form, if that's required by the person who files a Schedule
Right.
F. So there are innocuous things, requirements that may actually be a real conflict. So the common sense is to come up with what you think the process would be, and then as was talked about with the Ethics Commission, then they have something to respond to. They don't do just hypotheticals, they do a real situation with a real person.
Yep.
All right. I think that basically covers everything.
Mr. Chairman?
Mrs. Bertram.
I just have a question about the location of the market itself. I know right now it's adjacent to the Ritter Building, and, you know, in that general area between the annex or the old primary school and the Ritter Building. One of the things that the Building Reuse Committee is looking at eventually is a long-term plan for those municipal buildings, which may impact the location of the farmers market. And earlier you talked about expanding the market and potentially including animals or you know, more vendors. One question that I have is whether or not that space can accommodate that. And then secondly, have you looked at any other locations, given the fact that eventually that may change, the location availability may change?
We have discussed that quite a bit, and I've tried to, in my way of thinking, I've tried to look at what we have right now is, in my estimation, a dwindling market that is, the last couple markets, they were almost non-existent. And we have talked about maybe doing something with the library. There's a lot of opportunity there, you know, to run events with the library, having the farmers market closer to the public library. There's been talk about the parking lot, sort of where the old primary school and the historical society is. In the town of Fairhaven, down the south coast, where I go quite regularly, they have, it's not the historic society, but it is a historical building and museum that's right at the site. And so what they do is they open the building during the market. And so, you know, the historical society could potentially do that on occasion, to create a special event, open the historical society if we were there. Right now, the way I see it, I would like to move toward this coming season, you know, June to October, and see if we can't get the market back on its feet. And from that point, we're not particularly married to any location. You know, if it gets bigger, and we felt the need to move, that would be fantastic. If my brother's involved with the Woonsocket, Rhode Island market, which as of this year, they had such a successful summer that as fall rolled in, they started frantically looking for an indoor space to move the thing in. And they've been running it all winter with fairly high level of success. So like you said, with the Building Reuse Committee, you know, if we had a good year, maybe we could find a space to keep the thing going. So we're not particularly locked in, and we've discussed, our planning board liaison said maybe we do it at his place up on Flat Hill Road. You know what I mean? It's like we've really talked about a lot of things. The visibility at the Ritter Building is tough because by the time you're driving by, the light turns and you got to go with traffic, and it's hard to, especially if you're not a resident, you don't know that you can turn onto Lancaster and you can come around the other way. So we are really up for any suggestions, or, you know.
Okay.
And I think I would invite you to make suggestions as well. You know, as you come up with ideas to either lengthen your season or increase your reach, to the extent that the building reuse can be of service in that area, we'd certainly be open to hearing what you had in mind.
Yeah, we definitely, like I said, we like to, I like to try to tackle things, you know, steps at a time, you know, but this is definitely in the back of our minds, and we discuss, you know, it comes up at our meetings a lot, especially for a couple of the vendors that would really like a winter market. You meet vendors especially, it's very difficult to find a place to sell, because they can't get into the supermarkets because they can't produce on a regular basis. So the indoor winter market would give those vendors a place, without having to create a store of their own or get into the supermarkets. So.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Well, we thank you both
Thank
very
you.
much.
Well, thank you for your
Your
time.
voice comes back.
I hope it doesn't. And thank you also, like I said, for now that I've done this for a year plus, I have a real understanding of this is a part-time job, and you guys certainly commit a lot more than we are, and it's service is
Appreciate your
appreciated.
time, too.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to skip to number 4, because the chiefs are both here, waiting patiently. So we're going to hear a report from the police chief and the fire chief regarding the use of Narcan by the police department and/or fire department and their rescue services. So this was brought up with an email to the board, and our last meeting of the year, the writer of the email was here to discuss it, and we said at that point that it would be, and it had been at that point already, distributed to both chiefs, and then we would get their report on it. So tonight is their report. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening. I guess I'll just start off quickly. I'll keep my remarks short, give Chief Marino some time. Fire department's been online using this since September of 2013. We carry it on the ambulances. All the EMTs are trained in its use. To date, looking through our records, we've used it a total of 4 times, going on how many times we've had to actually replace doses. Because it's a controlled substance, we have to have medical oversight for that. That's part of our medical control agreement. That's part of our ambulance license with Neshoba Hospital. So there's a physician oversight with it, which Chief Marino will talk is required for first responders. This is something that, while there was some discussion about what civilians can do with it, because we're considered professional level medical people, there's a lot more oversight required on that for us. But it requires licensing because it's a controlled substance to carry it, which Chief Marino will talk about. And one of the things we looked into is, unfortunately, they can't piggyback on our existing agreements. The department has to have their own separate agreement. But just to keep it very simple, again, fire department is already online with it. We've been online with it for a little bit over a year. We have used it a couple times, not a lot. We gave you some numbers on how many times the calls have gone out. Again, data is garbage in, garbage out. The system tracks poisonings and overdoses. The calls could be coded as something else. In 2014, we listed 6 that came in under that category. Chief Marino has some other numbers too. Again, sometimes it may not be that our personnel delivered it. It may have been done because, again, we work in concert with the ALS units from the nearby communities. Some of their people may have given it, and they're tracking it as they did it. So, again, they're there. We have done the calls. They're not a huge percentage of our calls right now, but it is there. With that note, I'll pass it on to Chief Marino for his end of it, and if anybody has any questions on the fire or EMS end, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
All right. The Narcan use with police departments is not new, but it's relatively new. There was some pilot programs done around the state. One in Quincy, I believe was actually the one that began this whole program using Narcan by the police. The thought was that the police departments are first responders. We're out there patrolling around we're on the road, whereas the fire departments have to respond to calls. They don't patrol the roads with fire trucks. So they thought that the police would, the public would be better served by the police carrying Narcan because the ability to deliver it quickly, was, I guess, the main issue.
Can I ask you one question, just for the people at home, because it's spelled out very well as we're talking about Narcan. Can you just summarize or just read what you wrote to us, what Narcan is, so that people at home know what we're talking about?
All right. Narcan is a trade name by which naloxone is marketed under. Naloxone is used to counter the effects of opiate overdose, such as heroin and morphine. It's an antagonist that suppresses the activity of the opiate's receptor. And an overdose occurs when opiates reside on the receptors in the brain that cause life-threatening depression of the central nervous system or breathing. So essentially, somebody ingests, usually without the intention of an overdose, but they ingest an opiate or take it by needle or by snorting it or whatever the means may be, and the drug basically takes over those receptors in the brain that help you to breathe and depresses it to the point where you stop breathing. What Narcan does is it's an antagonist that goes in to that, it attacks that receptor and actually brings the person into a state of withdrawal. And I think, as I've said this before to you, sometimes, on occasion, that state of withdrawal becomes kind of violent. That was another reason why the thought was that the police should probably be there when that happens. Opiates are medication protocols used for pain management. Some of those include like Vicodin, oxycodone, Percocet, Percodan, morphines, Demerol, codeine, and of course heroin right now is one of the major problems that we see on the street.
Okay, so I appreciate you, just so people at home know that that's what we're talking about, the police department being trained and discussing.
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, I guess we're responding to some citizens who are concerned that the police don't carry Narcan, and I think one citizen alluded to the fact that one of her children was saved by the use of Narcan. And we find, obviously, that our stand on it is we think it's very important. That's what we're in the business of, saving lives. But again, I'm stuck between Celia and Charybdis here because, I came here last year and presented you with a workload analysis, which was way over and above what we're really capable of doing. And now, we're going to be asked to take on another responsibility. And if you read this, there's a lot of responsibilities that go along with carrying Narcan. And, my fear is that, we're not going to be able to keep up our end of the bargain here. And then somebody's going to die, and we're going to be viewed as ineffective. As I always say, that's one of my biggest fears, is that we're going to be viewed as ineffective because we weren't able to save somebody. Obviously, the priority here is that we want to do this. But again, I don't know where to start in terms of handing this drug out, in terms of managing the use of it right now with the staff that we have. So yes, if that's what the public wants, then we're very willing to do it, obviously. And again, I can't emphasize enough, that's our job. We're here to save lives. So we're obviously very willing to do it. There's some costs associated with it. We have to be trained. And as I alluded to in this report, we have to at least train one person to train us. That's a 16-hour course, and I believe it's about $800 to pay that person to go to training. To train us would only take an hour individually. Now, of course, our collective bargaining agreement says that we have to pay a 4-hour minimum. However, what I would do if I'm going to implement this program is try to get this training done while we're doing some other training. Try to integrate it where it's only an hour's worth of training. The only other issue I have with it is that, and again in this report, it tells you that it's a substance that is a little unstable below a certain temperature and above a certain temperature. Now, our police cars they sit in the carport, they don't sit in the garage. Like the ambulance, it's great, you can leave it on the ambulance, so you don't have to have a couple doses on the ambulance. With us, we'd have to issue it to every single officer. Because they'd have to put in their patrol bags, and it would have to come in the building at the end of their shift, because there's times when they get out of a patrol car and it may sit for 8 hours because it's not assigned to somebody until the shift following that. So, you know, the concern is it's either left out in the heat or in the cold. So that cost, and you know, and again, I received this data on the pricing of naloxone from Leominster Hospital's pharmacy, and these are wholesale prices. So at a wholesale cost, it'd be about $540 to issue each of our offices the two milligram doses. I was just told by the fire chief as I got here tonight that may not be true, that there was I guess a dramatic increase, which we kind of thought would happen. You know, this is something we anticipated in the price of naloxone up to, what was it?
Like I said, we were told we just had to restock some of ours today. We had been paying around $18 to $20. It went up to $51 a dose as of January 1st from our supplier.
So essentially,
because the demand is now there, the prices have gone up.
So I'm guessing around $1,000 to equip everybody. And as I said, I wasn't aware of that. I spoke just last week with the pharmacy at Leominster Hospital, and those are wholesale prices that they gave me. So at any rate, we're willing to do it. I mean, it's obviously we're very willing to do this, to put a program together, and I'm sure it wouldn't happen overnight. This is something that would take several months to get in place, to implement. You know, we'd have to get somebody trained, then we'd have to train the whole department. We have to get a permit from the state to even possess it, and so on and so forth. And then we'd have to put a program together to monitor its use and manage its use. So probably takes 6 to 8 months, being realistic, to get the program in place. But and again, I bring this up not because I'm trying to use this forum, but it's really important to know that, for the public to know, that, you know, we got a great car, but we're beginning to run without tires, so to speak. So, you know, we really got to step up here. And, you know, I asked for 3 people last year, and I'm in my 36th year here, and it just hasn't changed. We're asking for help all the time, and I'm not kidding when I say that. You know, we throw these responsibilities at us, and what my fear is that we're just going to become overwhelmed and not be able to deliver the service that we need to deliver. This is just one more thing. And again, I'm very willing to do this, and we'll make it work. But that's where we stand to date. You know, so I guess.
I was just going to add one thing, because so you mentioned the costs, and in looking at the report, it looks like to implement the program, it's probably about $7,000 to do the training and the initial stock of the drug, and then it would need to be replaced as it's used.
Well, that's only if we don't incorporate the training into an existing training program. Because that negates the $4,000. So you take that $4,000 out.
Okay.
So if we're able, so it comes out to, I think, about $2,300, even if you account for the $51 a dose, it comes out to $2,330, if I'm.
Yeah, you are reading that correctly. Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to, okay, but there are some, are you saying there's some other trainings that we don't have to pay them for? I mean, we're still going to have to pay them for trainings.
Well,
some of this is going to be.
We have some mandatory training coming
Right.
up, and what I was hoping to do is to try to incorporate this with some of that.
But this $4,000 that you have here, $4,100, that is not piggybacked on the other training?
No.
Okay.
No,
So at the worst case, town
Worst
manager
case.
said is $7,000.
that's correct,
But
yes.
the more important to, or equally important to me is there a requirement for every so many years you have to go back for a certain amount of training, or is once we get them trained, you're trained?
I in all the research I did, I didn't see any follow-up training at all.
So this
I
is
mean,
basically, except for the replacement of the drug every 2 years, it's really, what we're looking at here, whatever that cost is a one-time cost.
it's a one,
I believe it would be part of like the first responder
Well,
refresher.
right, I was-
When you go on to that.
that's what I was going to get to. We have to recert in CPR and first aid every 2 years. We would bring this in as a piece of that
Okay.
curriculum and go over it again.
But it would not be any added cost if it was included in the first responder training.
No, it's not any, even that, it wouldn't be, it's just, it's like the IEDs. We do that every time
Okay.
we cover those.
So it's
every
really
time.
just the cost of the drug, whatever that would be for, if we gave it to all the officers, you know,
Right.
that's, every 2 years, that's what would be replaced.
Right, and-
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the shelf life is.
2 years.
2 years.
The shelf life is 2 years, so that's obviously a cost that we.
So,
have
okay,
to
so that's the
think.
cost part. So let
Yeah.
me ask you a couple of other questions. I mean, about your experience, how long has Narcan been available?
To us, to the police, or just in general?
Just in general.
General, it's been out many,
Yeah,
probably between 10 and 20 years.
Okay, so-
It's only become available down to the EMT and the first responder level within the last couple of years.
Okay, so 2 years. So in those 2 years, especially given the news of how high the heroin epidemic is,
Yeah.
how many times has the police gotten to a case where somebody may have been in need of it and could not be administered until some kind of emergency medical services arrived?
Well, I mean, I can guess by the data that I received from MedStar, how many times we've been to those calls.
Okay.
I mean, our data indicates that there were 16 unspecified drug overdoses in 2012, and then in 2013 there was 17. But when I had MedStar query their records, they said that, now this is MedStar alone, we do use Townsend Medics as well.
MedStar's one of the ALS providers.
Yeah, this is only one, and according to them, they administered between January 1st, 2012 and January 1st, 2015, they administered Narcan to 23 patients in Lunenburg. So
That's a good proportion.
it's pretty good, yeah. So some of what I'm getting at is some of the 17 must have been them responding and administer the
Sure.
Narcan. I just can't, we
No,
never kept
that's-
track of
That's
it,
fine.
but we can
But
assume
We can assume there's a good percentage.
a good percentage, right.
And in both of your expertise, especially the fire chief because of the EMS, but I'm assuming every one of those times when it's given could be easily considered a life-threatening situation. I assume you don't give somebody Narcan if it's not considered life-threatening.
Our protocol is they have to be unresponsive. They can't be sitting up talking. They
Okay,
have to
so
be
that would be a yes.
unconscious.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
So with
And-
that information in mind, I am fully cognizant of your requests in the past, and believe me, have been very supportive of getting the help you need, and will continue this year to be very supportive. But this being what seems to me, and I understand it's an additional responsibility, but for what seems to be, in anybody's estimation, when compared to human life, a short money situation, even if we don't do it with any other training and we do it with this number, even if we had to spend the $7,000, to me, as somebody looking at it, you know, not the first time, but maybe the second time in the last month, and from reading reports, after being prompted to read reports that were either provided to the Board of Selectmen or on my own research, I am fully supportive of us adopting this and making this part of the police department, especially given the fact that it is a critical need for somebody who needs it, and that the police are generally the first responders, and that, as you indicated, when given a person who is unresponsive, when given this, could come out of that unresponsiveness being violent or aggressive. We would want a police officer there anyway. All those things, and the fact that time is life, as we know. So, I mean, in my estimation, I would say as soon as you can put a plan together to do it, and as soon as we can come up with the town manager, and if we can start appropriating the money before next fiscal year, I would try to do it. I mean, if it saves a life, to me, as one person, it would have been worth it.
I agree wholeheartedly. I understand that everyone is taxed in the police department and the fire department most of all. But, you know, as the chairman just said, if we can save one life for relatively short money, we need to do it.
Right.
I agree as well. I think that we, not to ignore and certainly to support the budget requests. You know, we talk a lot about level of service and what level of service we need to provide for the amount of money the town pays. I would not like to see the level of service deteriorate by adding duties, but this is so critical. I think it's one we have to consider.
If you just let me speak to that point again, because I don't want any public that's viewing this meeting right now to misunderstand me. This board in particular and the town manager has always been very supportive of our needs. And we realize, and I have to be realistic, that, you know, the money just isn't available to give us some type of infusion of staffing. We realize that, but that's why I'm pleading to the public now. They have to understand that this is the point we're at. And I agree wholeheartedly with you. I don't care if it's $10,000. Unfortunately, I'm not in charge of the money, but I don't care what it costs. We will save a life at any cost. We don't care. If we have to do it for nothing, and we've done that thousands of times I've done it over the last 36 years. So that's not an issue, you know. So I just want to make that clear, that in all the meetings we've ever had, at least since way before I've even been chief, the Board of Selectmen and the town manager have been very supportive of our needs. We just got to find some money. It's because otherwise, you know, the wheels are coming off. I guarantee you. That, as one of the members of the Finance Committee once said, "Don't come in here and tell me the roof's caving in if it's not." Well, I'm telling you now, it almost caved in when a car hit the post out there. But it's starting to, so.
I fully support this program as well, understanding the limitations that we have to deal with.
I agree.
When you come before us for the FinCom, as I've said many times, I hear what you're saying, and I've spoken to the general public of the audience who listen to this broadcast and listen to the rebroadcast. I say the same thing to them, and I've been saying that. Mm-hmm. And believe me, I haven't done it for 36 years, but I've certainly done it for 10 to 12, and I share your frustration because I believe that the request that your department and other departments have made, but I'm going to single out your department because your department has been happening for so long since I was on the FinCom. Mm-hmm. That, you know, the inability for the town to get better staffing levels that have been pitched by your predecessor and now you, I don't know what to say. I mean, I think all the evidence has been, we had Mr. Luck here talking about his experience with the EMT on our town, and now we have this responsibility. There are certainly enough data for people to look at to say, yes, we need to do something. And I hope, believe me, I hope this is the year. I really want it to be, because the requests are genuine and they are real.
Mm-hmm. The other side of that is, I agree with everything that you just said, but the other side of that is the economic challenges that people are facing at home are real as well. Mm-hmm. And with the voting of the new school, and we haven't even seen the impact on our tax bills for that. Quite frankly, I don't know that people can pay more than they're paying. So it's a struggle. I think it's a struggle for people at home as well as for everyone that works for the community. And certainly for us sitting here as well as the Finance Committee, is to balance the services that we have to provide, that we should provide, with the funds that we have. And this year is going to be challenging, and in my prediction, you know, the next 10 to 20 years are going to be even more challenging, because I'm not sure that the financial picture is going to get any better.
Anybody have any follow-up questions for either of the chiefs? I thank you both for coming in.
Very
For
welcome.
the continued good work in your departments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Open warrant for annual town meeting on May 2nd. Oh, my wife will be so happy to hear that. May 2nd.
So this is a request that you vote this evening to open the warrant for the annual town meeting, with the warrant to stay open until Monday, March 23rd at 4 p.m.
Do I have a motion to that regard?
So moved?
Second?
Any further discussion? Everybody has the proposed schedule for annual town meeting from the town manager, starting from the highlighting of today, the closing of the 23rd, and then town meeting on May 2nd, Saturday, May 2nd. So, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. So there should be an announcement go out to all the department heads and all boards, commissions, and committees. Ratify the sale of bond anticipation notes of $400,000 for the purchase of the Lane property.
Okay. So on December 30th, the town took bids for short-term financing in the amount of $400,000 for the purchase of the Lane property. We received 3 bids, with the low bidder being Eastern Bank, with an interest rate of 0.6%. The purchase price of the property is $400,000. The town will receive a grant, or has been awarded a grant from the state, through the state land grant program, in the amount of 64%, or $256,000. It is a reimbursement grant, so we have to pay the full cost, and then we will be reimbursed once we submit all of the paperwork. But that is the reason why we are borrowing the full amount. We are taking this out for a term of 1 year to coincide with some other borrowing that we're doing, which is why we're doing the 1 year term. The interest rate, again, 0.6%, that results in interest costs of $2,400 for this particular item. We did go through a rating review, and the town's AA+ stable rating was affirmed. At your meeting next week, we're going to be doing, as we talked about last month, the next borrowing for the school project, which is about $20 million. So we did the rating for both of those, but that'll be on your agenda for next week. So this is a request. The purchase and the borrowing was authorized by town meeting. Because of the holiday and the timing of the closing, we had to do this prior to your meeting this evening. The majority of you were in to sign the documents yesterday, and this is just a request that you ratify that action.
So I entertain a motion that we ratify the sale of the ban as just described by the town manager.
So moved?
We have a second.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. And following on that, we execute the acceptance of the deed and the settlement agreement for the purchase of the Lane property.
So I just received back from town council shortly before the meeting this evening a copy of the acceptance of deed. I provided a copy to you with your packet. The request is to have you vote to accept the deed pending the approval of the deed by town council. There's still some back and forth between the two parties. The town council will finalize the settlement statement tomorrow and prepare the documents and have them recorded. There is a request that you authorize council to finalize the settlement statement on your behalf, and also that you vote to accept the deed at the meeting this evening, and I'd like to get 2 originals to send back to council in the morning.
The only question that I have, is there some controversy regarding the deed? Is that why it's going back and forth, or?
There's no controversy, it's just, I think all of these things go up until the last minute. I don't
Okay.
know why, but I mean,
Okay.
I can tell you that town council has been working very, very diligently through the holidays to get this done. She was on scheduled vacation and continued to be working on this, so.
The only comment that I would have, I have no problem making a motion to accept the deed pending approval of the deed by town council. I just would add that we want to ensure that there are no restrictions contained within that deed that contradict the grant application. I would be surprised if there were, but I just want to make sure that there are not, because we've run into that before.
Then I think you'd be the perfect candidate for making this motion.
I would make a motion to accept the deed pending approval of the deed by town council, with the condition that the deed, as approved by town council, does not contain any restrictions that contradict the grant application for the property.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion?
The other question would be whether they're looking for easements or rights of passage or other things like that.
Right, and that's what I want to make sure of. The grant application specifically outlined the proposed uses as well as the existing trail system and proposed, and did not contain any easements. So I want to make sure that any of that is not contained on this deed
Right,
before
I
we
mean-
accept it.
May have more to do with boundaries and specific
Right.
language on that
But,
than,
but the fact that it's going back and forth concerns me a little bit, because as you know, we ran into this problem several years ago.
yes.
Well, not this problem, but
Well, this is
no,
solving that problem.
Right, a problem
Right.
that the deed contained restrictions that we were not aware of.
And this is solving that.
do I have a second? Did somebody second it?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. There'll be 2 coming down. Okay, number 5, receive and review the Coordinated Public Transportation Plan by the MRPC.
This is, unfortunately, the information that was contained in the packet didn't have to do with the Coordinated Public Transit Plan. It was the Regional Transportation Plan, which we should take a look at, and that was included in the packet, and I just want to touch on that before I go to the other. The Regional Transportation Plan covers bicycle and pedestrian highway systems and transit, and it outlines all of the projects that are going to be incorporated in the TIP. So we certainly want to be involved in that process and forward comments. The bicycle and the information that was in the packet contains some hearings, but we have an opportunity to submit comments, questions, or concerns throughout the RTP process, and I certainly think we should comment on the Chase Road project and the need for that project and reinforce that. And if there are any other projects that could be eligible for funding that the DPW director has on his radar, we certainly want to cover those in our comments. So I think we do want to bring this up again, the RTP, and specifically have the DPW comment on that.
Okay.
As far as the coordinated public transportation plan, the reason that I wanted to comment on this is our opportunity. I know Mrs. Luck has been working very hard on the survey, which she's going to talk about, on trying to increase service to Lunenburg. And as this board knows, we have in the past received at least a couple of letters from citizens outlining the need for services for disabled people. The Coordinated Public Transit Plan specifically addresses transportation of elderly, disabled, well, elderly and disabled. So what I did was I talked to Doreen Noble of the Council on Aging to kind of get an idea from her as to whether or not she felt that our existing van service is sufficient to address those needs. And the response was no, that we do need to expand the service, and that there are specific needs to increase the transit service. And that demand is really related to the increase in density, specifically in the Whalum area, with the impact of Tri-Town and Emerald Place. And she outlined the fact that there's been an increase in individuals. In 2010, there were 1,815 individuals over the age of 60, and this year that's increased to 2,598, and it's projected to only go up. So our population is aging. And we are currently serviced by one van, which operates, it's an 8-passenger van, which operates 4 days a week. And it's really just not sufficient, and it's very limited service. And one of the biggest gaps that remains is transportation to Boston or Worcester for medical services. Right now, people who need to visit those medical facilities for dialysis or chemotherapy have to take a shuttle service early in the morning to the intermodal in Fitchburg to access the transit system, and then they have to return much later in the day based on what that train schedule is. And these are people that are ill and elderly. So having that need addressed would obviously serve the citizens of Lunenburg. Additionally, disabled residents have very limited access to employers, and because we only have an 8-passenger van, if they're transporting a mobily deficient person in a wheelchair, that takes 2 seats on the van. So now you've lost 2 seats versus 1 in an 8-passenger van, which is already overloaded. So in the plan, one of the things I noted, and I actually called Brad Harris today, because there's some tables within the plan that identify population with a disability by community, as well as people that are below, low income is the other entity. Population below poverty level, and then individuals that are over 65. And what I saw is that the charts are incorrect. If you read the percentages, what the plan does is it identifies the total population with a disability, low income, or elderly, and then it identifies the percentage of people of the community that are within a 0.25 mile buffer or a 0.5 mile buffer. The stats in the draft are all wrong. According to the stats in the draft, they're meeting 100% of the need, but the numbers of the people that they actually service doesn't match that percentage. And I called Brad to go over it today, and what he said is, after looking at it, that all the formulas are incorrect. So that needs to be addressed.
Thank you.
So what I did is I drafted a letter, and just because I didn't want to take a ton of time, and certainly it's open to edit or changes, but I really just identified the things that I just talked about. And we can, based on Phyllis's comments on the survey, we can certainly modify it, but I wanted to have something to share tonight.
Yes, my only suggestion is where you say, and it's in the next to the last paragraph, it is apparent Lunenburg would benefit greatly with expanded service, that we just expand that and make it clearly both the regular fixed route as well as the transit service through the Council on Aging. Actually ask for both areas that would need to be expanded,
Okay.
which you refer to in the text of the
Yeah.
body.
Yeah. And I
Otherwise, I
don't-
think it's good. I think it's very good.
Yeah, great.
I think
Okay,
you
thank
said
you.
you talked to Doreen
I did.
directly.
I did.
Um,
And she actually provided me a couple emails today about stats, and that's where some of the statistics that I put in here came directly from her.
I'm thinking she must have some data on the number of residents in town who might need the transportation to Boston or Worcester, because I'm sure you remember maybe three.
She thought it was about 14,
Yeah.
according to today. And I specifically didn't put that in because I didn't want to, you know, I did put in the 50 bus trips for handicapped individuals,
Yeah.
for mobility impaired individuals in 2015. But I didn't put the specific number related to trips. What I'm hoping, you know, this plan identifies need, and within the draft plan, it does recognize that there is a need to expand transit service. What I want to do is make the case that Lunenburg, they need to look at expanding transit service to Lunenburg. And my hope is that this will be the catalyst for more discussion with the town and with stats, because the stats that she has on the aging population vary greatly from what the stats in the report that MRPC put together. They show that, you know, there's a 1.1% is elderly, and she's saying there's over 25% is elderly. So there's a big difference in the statistics, and I'm hoping that this will spur the conversations. I'm happy to incorporate it if you think it's helpful.
Well, I was just thinking, it was maybe 3 years ago, we talked about implementing a second van at the Council on Aging. In my recollection, it was one of the specific reasons was to provide this type of transportation, people who needed to get to chemotherapy treatment.
Right.
And to me, that's very compelling.
Right.
And it just, again, my recollection is it was too much money for us to do it, because it wasn't a whole lot of transportation, but it was really meaningful transportation. And I just thought maybe if we had the same type of statistics for that too, maybe it makes it stronger.
I can
but-
give her a call tomorrow and ask her if she can give me the stats on that, and I can add it to that paragraph.
Because the report talks about doing its statistics based on the census surveys that they do annually. And they do a limited number, and then they extrapolate the number out.
Right.
And so the issue I have with that, especially for the elderly, and whether they actually reached the number, and they even acknowledge in the chart that it's not necessarily going to be true. And if we have different statistics than their statistical survey, that I think that perhaps not in time for this report comment, but or even with this report comment, that we talk about that we have clear estimates of the population is a certain age. And the other concern I have is, do we have any numbers on people with self-identified disabilities?
Yeah, and
that becomes a more of a struggle.
Right, and I think that, you know, one of the things when I talked to Brad about these charts, because one of my whole issues was I was trying to look at their statistical data, which is incorrect, and comparing it to our statistical data. And what he said is he recognizes that the data that's in these reports is dated, and it's an extrapolation, and it's not going to be as accurate as our local data. So I think that, again, my hope is that this is going to spur conversations between MRPC and the community to get that data, and that there is a strong need, and make a compelling case. You know, really, I want to get us on their radar that we have a need for this, and that's specifically why I mentioned the survey. And I actually have alerted Brad to the survey in the past, you know, and he has reminded me that for this particular plan, which is the coordinated public transit, the focus is low-income, elderly, and disabled. So that's where my focus is on this. But when we talk about the regional transportation plan, which I talked about a few minutes ago, that I think we do need to make the case that we need expanded transit services. And parking is also a big issue. I mean, and whether or not that's something we need to put on their radar as a municipal parking garage, I don't know. But it's certainly something that's how Air got their parking garage, is it was talked about for a long time before that idea came to fruition. So I think we as a community have to start thinking about our transportation needs and voicing them loud and clear and getting them incorporated in plans. So I will call Doreen and get the stats on the people with that commute to Boston, and I will add Bob's comment on the second to last paragraph. Is there anything else that people are seeing that's missing?
That would incorporate everything.
Okay, if I forward this to you, Carrie, can you put it on letterhead and stuff? Okay.
Okay, let's, because this is related, let's talk about 7, and just so we don't have to come back to 6. 6 we're going to come back to next week, because I don't think there's an update right now.
What I wanted to do is pass out an updated MART system map and schedule.
Sure.
And I think it helps to be able to look at it and see exactly what kind of service we're receiving at this point. Did I not have enough?
You have enough.
Did you get one, Carrie?
Yep.
I think.
Carrie, get one?
It goes to Carrie.
Is it one?
There's 2 pieces.
There's two pieces.
okay.
One's a
because
timetable.
One's missing a
One's a
piece.
timetable and
Oh, I
one's the
got it.
map.
No,
One's
I
the
got it,
map.
I got it.
And so Lunenburg is currently on,
So that timetable is extra. That's
Okay.
Carrie's.
Right.
so Lunenburg is on Route 1, Route 3, and Route 7. And you can kind of see them, they're laid out on the map as well. And when we surveyed people, we asked them, what increase in service did they foresee? Were they more interested in going from the center down to Walmart, going from the center over to Whalum, or combining all 3? And it's, there really weren't there's like 32 people that responded, and I can pass those out again, too. More people thought going from the center to Hannaford Walmart was desirable, but when people did comments, they wanted to get to the commuter rail.
Sure.
And so we are planning a workshop with MART, with Mo Khan and Bruno Fisher for the 20th from 6 to 7. And I thought if we were able to give them some ideas, how much money are we willing to spend? Which routes do we think we prefer? They would be able to give us better ideas on what we might be able to do.
Do we have any statistics or any data on Lunenburg passengers on the 3 routes that come to Lunenburg?
That go up to Walmart, you mean?
Well, you said there's 3 routes that
Yeah,
go to...
that service Lunenburg.
But I
So
think
that's
those
Route-
individuals are going from Leominster and Fitchburg they don't ever come to Lunenburg to transport them to, do they? Or am I missing that?
Well, the route stops at Whalum Summer, so
But-
people
but-
could get on there.
Okay, but then it goes from there to the Intermodal Transportation Center, right?
On the Route 1, yep. And Route 2, it goes from there to Kings Corner. And then goes down to the mall at Whitney Field. And Route 3 goes from Lunenburg, from the Walmart to the Reliant Medical Group, then to the Intermodal Center. So
So it's not clear whether Lunenburg residents utilize the bus service that comes through the center, goes to Lunenburg Crossing.
Right.
Whalum Whalum Street, Summer Street, you might be looking at some local people doing that, and it's possible some people at Lunenburg Crossing, but what I'd be interested is finding out how many the way to ask the question is how many people come to Lunenburg Crossing, and then how many people leave Lunenburg Crossing? And theoretically, I don't know if you'd ever know.
Well, if they're not coming from Lunenburg, then I'm assuming that everybody who gets there eventually gets home.
That's right. You'd have to find out.
Unless people are rounding up people at night.
That's right. Let's all go for a ride.
Right, I mean, I think the transportation right now is from people outside of Lunenburg coming to Lunenburg Crossing.
Certainly,
to
given
shop and then
given this
going
map,
back.
certainly
Yeah.
seems that way.
You know, so I don't think the needs of Lunenburg are being met at all right now.
Well, except I have to believe there's some people who go take the bus from Lunenburg Crossing to get to the intermodal train station.
Yeah, because from 6:30 in the morning,
Right,
you
right.
can
Right.
take a bus at Whalum, and, you know, you can be there, you can be at the intermodal at 6:30, so. So, but at least we know what's available right now. And Mo provided us with a cost analysis of the 3 routes, and in the, yeah, I can pass those down. We passed, and and this is just something to think about. And
Well, you know, the one, number 9, I guess my question is, if it goes from Lunenburg Crossing to Lunenburg Center to Emerald Place.
which one? Route?
Well, no, I'm looking at 9, but it's the number of participants. You gave out the survey results last
The
week.
survey.
Oh, okay, uh-huh.
That said Lunenburg Crossing to Lunenburg Center, Lunenburg Crossing to Emerald Place, Lunenburg Crossing to Lunenburg Center to Emerald Place, which incorporates all of those.
Right.
Right.
So if the people that wanted to get off in Lunenburg Center are still going to just do the 20-minute loop, and then by adding the Emerald Place, you get the 30-minute.
That's what I said. I said that time.
So,
It seemed like
yeah,
that route
yeah.
seems to be the most,
Because that covers everybody.
that covers everybody.
So I
And
think,
when you look at the cost analysis, you can do that covers everybody, take less trips.
now, do any of those then go to the intermodal? If we did that?
Well, it would be
Which
hooked into one of the other routes, right?
7 or? Any of the routes that currently come into Lunenburg all go into the intermodal. So the question would be whether that would be the full circle.
Right, where would the intermodal fit in that loop?
They would probably be, instead of using the bus, they would probably be using vans, because the vans are $50 an hour and the bus is $85 an hour. So you might be able to create a loop that you wanted.
As long as you don't do a van to a bus that people then have to change.
Right.
Because the good thing about having it be part of the system.
The vans don't have a schedule? That means they're booked?
Well, is
Fluently?
what he,
Or
on
fluidly?
the cost analysis, they're just saying if you had trips, certain number of trips,
Right.
and
So when is the proposed workshop?
it's on the 20th.
Okay.
So if we could say, you know, we're not going to, now we look at the bottom, remember we talked about initially that out of the 66,000 we spend, 32,000 goes toward the MBTA and 33,000 goes to MART. They are swearing up and down that every dollar we spend with MART decreases the amount we have to send to the MBTA, so that you could spend $30,000 without it actually costing you more money. You might want to be conservative and spend less than $30,000 just to make sure that works.
But it looks like none of these options is less than that. Am I?
Well, not at this point, but you could have less trips. You know, you can tailor it. I
Take the
think
12 trips
for the
and make it
workshop,
10
Whatever works.
Or 8 or
Yeah.
whatever.
you know, basically, they want to do what we can afford and we want to do. So if we give them some feedback about, listen, we can't spend more than 30,000, but we want to go to the center, to Walmart, and to Whalum, what can you do for us? I mean, you know, we were, at least, the workshop would be more useful if they had some information on what we really wanted and could afford.
Yeah, I mean, okay, well, and that makes sense. Again, I think, just to reiterate what Mrs. Bertram said, I mean, I think that one trip, that the 30-minute route, the last one, you know, C on your cost analysis, seems to make the most sense, because it covers the places we want. So if you need to tell them something after our discussion tonight, I would say that that's what they'd want to focus on. What I think we want to focus on, or I personally want to see, is, you know, their willingness to work with us is evident, and we had some people respond in the survey. I just don't want to go through the point where we go through the motions of making a bus service that seemingly nobody takes. That would not be good for anybody.
Right.
Right.
Now, partially in the beginning, when it's offered, I'm sure that's going to happen until people get used to it. But we just have to make sure that we get what we think is going to be what people will use. And then whatever happens in the change of the schedule and the additional routes, that we promote them very heavily.
I
That
think
says, listen, these are now available, here's the new, you know, timetables, here's everything, so that people know they're there.
And I think promotion is a big thing, because I bet a lot of people don't know that this is
I've never even
already.
seen this map or this before. I mean,
Right.
not that I would use the bus generally anyway, but
And on the back, it shows what the rates are and the passes you can get and everything. It's really pretty comprehensive.
Right.
But, so I think people, first of all, need to know what's available.
Right.
You know, so if we do make a change, you're right, we do need to really promote it.
You know, one of the things I would like to see is the AM hours are 8 to 10. I mean, you know, based on the comments, and I wish more people had taken the survey.
Right.
And I would encourage people, is it still up online?
It probably is. We had wanted it closed by December because we wanted to do some discussion, but we certainly can
You know,
still promote
I
it.
mean, I would like more information, and I wish more people had taken the survey, but based on the comments that we see, is that people are really looking for transportation to the transit.
Right.
So, you know, my thought is, I think the afternoon hours of 4 to 6 are great. If we could maybe make the AM trips a little bit earlier to accommodate working people.
Right.
And then incorporate within this a trip to the intermodal center. So that way it would cover everybody.
No, I agree.
You know, I don't know whether or not that's feasible. I don't know, obviously that's going to reduce the amount of trips. But I think we might cover more need.
Right.
I have a question on the money. Surprise, surprise, surprise. So under C, estimated cost $84,000. Would we be using our MBTA assessment to offset the local share?
Yes.
And the state share is coming from where?
Mart gets it.
Okay,
Okay, you know, that's what I'm told.
okay.
That we'd only pay the 42.
I think we're going to have to make that clear at 20th when we have the general here. Which part of the money is going where?
And we
I
did.
see lots of
And
numbers already.
supposedly, they said they get grants, and,
Yeah,
and, you know, they were also assuming that, you know, people are gonna pay for the service, so you get some revenue from the people taking the service. But that's why I thought maybe if we approach it cautiously, so that we try it before we
But
expand.
we did look at the law because I didn't believe that we could use the MBTA assessment, and it does clearly state that we can
Right.
use that to offset local transit, and our share of the MBTA assessment is distributed among the other communities that are paying the assessment. I mean, it seems crazy to me, but we can.
I know, that's what it's.
My
it clearly
concern would
says
be
that.
trying to implement something during the year. I don't know how the MBTA can just, I mean, how
Right.
it can just
No, we-
reassess other communities.
right.
So-
My goal would be that we have this set in the, so,
Beginning of the fiscal year.
right, so the beginning, July 1 in the FY 16 budget. Always got to play those games. Which one are we in?
Because, you know, we can have it approved and not implement it also, right? You
Well,
know,
let's,
we can
well, I don't
discuss-
want this to be an exercise, right? I really want it to, if we go through those motions, I really want it to happen. But I think for financial reasons and reporting reasons with the state and the budgets, we really want to start it on, cleanly on a new fiscal year instead of worrying about, okay, how do we divide this up again?
Right, right.
But I think that this one-page sheet that was provided to you needs a lot of explanation, because I agree with town manager. I don't know I'm not exactly comfortable with what I think the local share and the state share is and how this all plays out. And that's what we want to go over. And we should have our numbers for this year so we can use them as comparisons. I'm assuming that's what these are right here.
So when I talk to them, I'll tell them that we prefer C. Is there a cap on how much we want to tell them that we'd be willing to spend, so that, do we not want to spend more than the MBTA amount?
Well, is it linear? I mean, is it $7,000 a trip? It's 12 trips, $84,000. If we take out one of the trips, does that remove $7,000? I mean, that's what we want to know.
I think it is.
Yeah, I mean,
You reduce the trips, you reduce the
So
expense.
the answer basically is we don't want to have an out-of-pocket expense.
Right.
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 I like it.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think that'll
One
give.
thing off your list.
yeah.
And again, I'd really like to know whether or not this would allow people to get to the transit system easily from Lunenburg.
Well, in order to do that, we'd have to know what the train schedule is, too. So that would be something probably helpful to have to answer Mrs. Bertram's question.
Right.
If it's going to help people getting to the train station, it doesn't help if we get there 10 minutes, if the bus gets there 10 minutes after the train leaves, because it's not like they have
Get the
trains.
Amtrak
This is
schedule.
not New York, right?
Right.
The other
Where
problem
there's
is
trains every 10, 15 minutes.
Which is exactly the problem with the residents going into Boston for the
Right.
dialysis and the chemo.
And the problem with the working part is that most of their service ends at 5 to 6 o'clock at night. So
Right.
therefore, if you get you're
If
going to
you've
have,
committed in the morning, you're committed.
you have to get out early
Right.
in order to get there. So that's part of the discussion of whether we can actually get people to and from.
But it might address, if we add more trips, my thought is, we talk about the individuals that are going in for medical treatment.
Yep,
This
absolutely.
would give individuals that are going into Boston for medical treatment an avenue to
option,
do that.
right.
Right,
If they
and
can get to
presumably
the
they wouldn't- I mean,
intermodal.
For working people, I think the fact that it stops at night would be difficult. I think for
Right.
people who are going in for treatment, where they're coming back in the middle of the afternoon,
Yep.
it could work.
Okay.
So I'll pass that on and see what they can put together for us for
Yeah,
the
that's
20th.
excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, minutes, warrants. Payroll warrant in the amount, what is this? Oh, that's right. In the amount of $645,493.02. Payroll deduction warrant in the amount of $337,998.75. And accounts payable in the amount of $858,064.32.
Thank you.
I can never find the summary sheet easily. There we go. Kind of fine.
That's a specific
Gotcha. Okay. Action items.
One of the things that I'd like to see under pending items for a future agenda item is stormwater management. It was one of our goals. And I know that the planning board is looking at regulations of communities relative to stormwater, as is the Conservation Commission. And I know Phyllis and I met with Ed Himlin of the Massachusetts Watershed Coalition to talk about services that they might be able to provide. But I'd like to potentially schedule a workshop about that, so if that could go under pending.
Okay.
You know, I thought that was a great meeting, and that conservation commissioners were there was perfect.
Right. Absolutely.
Just whenever we do. Yeah, we should put it first week in February. That might be a good idea, too. Okay. Committee reports. Board of Health.
No report?
Building Reuse Committee.
Building reuse met last evening. Some updates from the various members. The planning board member reported that the village zoning draft is going into the public input phase and will be ready for that shortly. The Historical Commission representative reported that they're working on a policy or bylaw for town meeting for buildings with historical significance in light of the village zoning bylaw. The school building representative reported that a map was drawn by the school building designers that show the current zoning rules vis-a-vis the TCP and the Brooks House. They do not address at this point the needs of the school going forward or their future campus, but it's kind of the first step in their discussion around what the minimum zoning requirements would be, and they intend to start those discussions at their meeting tomorrow evening. Several members of the Building Reuse Committee toured the old primary school this morning. I was one of them. I was pleasantly surprised that it's in better shape than I kind of thought it would be in. And we did some videotaping and photographing and stuff, so that's going to be something we review, because that came late to our charter, as you recall. And because all of these things are kind of dependent on or revolve around the town meeting, we didn't feel that we had a lot of work to do in the month of February, so unless something comes up, our next meeting will be in March, the first Monday of March, March 2nd.
Excellent. Capital Planning Committee.
Capital Planning Group met just prior to this meeting this evening. We did complete our prioritization of the capital requests, and we began a discussion about alternative fundings, borrowing, et cetera, for capital, and we want to have one more meeting before we totally finalize, so we'll be meeting again next Tuesday, but we are scheduled to present our prioritization to the FinCom in, I believe it's January 16th, thereabouts, 22nd, January 22nd.
Excellent. Finance Committee.
I have no report. Their next meeting is this coming Thursday, and they're going to review the 2014 audited financial statements and finalize the budget meeting schedule for the coming year.
Library Board of Trustees.
Meets next week.
MPO.
Meets next week.
Planning Board.
There was a meeting on December 22nd of the Planning Board, and they approved heard an A&R for the Mahoney Family Trust for Laurel Lane, property on Laurel Lane. There was also an A&R for a property on Mass Ave owned by the Sozik Revocable Family Trust. That one actually had some issues and needed to be denied and will have to be resubmitted because of the existence of two old septic systems on the property. And the Board of Health needs Title V inspections on those before the property can be divided. The property line of the school building committee came up again, and what they talked about, which may be moot given the actions by the school committee, is the parcel line, the property line came up again. And what they talked about was the possibility of having a joint meeting of the Building Reuse Committee, the Planning Board, the School Committee, and the Board of Selectmen to really discuss the property line and put this to bed once and for all. I don't know if that, given Jamie's report, if that still needs to happen.
We discussed that at Building Reuse as well, and we think that that is a good idea.
Okay.
But felt that the first step was for the school committee to kind of begin their discussion of what what they thought they wanted to do and then bring everybody together.
And the
In-
proposal
in
for that workshop has been brought to my attention too, and the main question was, okay, when is the school committee taking this up? And when it was found out it's on their agenda for tomorrow, everybody agreed that, well, let's wait to see what they discuss then before we schedule any workshop.
Okay. White Hill Crossing, they did, and I don't know if that's going to appear on a future agenda, Kerry, but they did approve that street acceptance with the contingency that the paving of a driveway and loaming and seeding be completed. And then they would recommend that it's not accepted if that slope is not sufficiently stabilized. So apparently there's still a couple issues, but that are proposed to be addressed prior to town meeting.
It's on for next week for
Okay.
your agenda.
Okay.
Has the applicant been made aware of this?
My understanding is that correspondence went from the peer reviewer to the applicant.
Okay.
That, based on my meeting, that was, the meeting that I attended, that was my understanding.
Okay.
The housing production plan, they did not actually vote to approve. It's going to be on the agenda for January 12th. They had not received my comments, and the planning director kind of went through them, and I did speak to some of them at the meeting, and they want to review those comments before they vote on the plan. The Village District bylaw, they went through and reviewed the bylaw, and Mr. Ebersol was there and commented on it, as did I. One of my comments, and Jamie touched on this, is one of the comments I made as a citizen is in reviewing the bylaw, there's a lot of information on uses and what can and can't be done, but the possibility of, as Mr. Ebersol said at the meeting, unintended consequences. And my concern is that the preservation of the historic nature of the town center. And that is when they mentioned that the Historical Commission is working on an architectural preservation bylaw that would be, and they indicated that it doesn't have to be approved by town meeting, that this is something that can be adopted locally, and that doesn't have to go by town meeting.
It would have to go to town meeting, but would not have to be a zoning bylaw, so it didn't have to have the official hearing.
Okay, so it does, but it
It's
does
still
go
a
to town meeting.
It's still a town bylaw, the Attorney General still has to review it.
Okay. Well, then in that case, my caution would be that without a public hearing, it's going to be much more difficult to pass at town meeting, I would think. So I would recommend that they go through that hearing
Well,
process.
why not?
But that the two articles would need to be done in conjunction with each other, because adoption of the village district bylaw without that architectural preservation bylaw could in fact have very significant impact on the historical nature of the town center.
Can you link the two?
There was
Separate bylaws.
It's two separate bylaws, but there was talk about how it would be done and how they would be done on the warrant, and that if one did not pass, then they would pass over the other.
Oh, okay.
So, but that what happens at town meeting is up to town meeting, but that would be the intent of the planning board. Is that if the architectural preservation bylaw did not pass, that they would recommend passing over the village district bylaw.
So you talk about the architectural one first, then?
I would think, but that was some of the discussion that they had at the planning board meeting. But they do need to be in conjunction with each other. They talked about public discussion on the village bylaw, and what they intend to do is at the second meeting in January, which is the 26th, is to invite individuals within the district to a meeting and send out actual postcards to those individuals. One of the things that I mentioned as a citizen is the need to make these meetings as publicly available as they can, because we're getting very close to town meeting. And I suggested putting it on the scroll, or putting it,
Right.
Making it available to people. Not just those within the district, because this has impact town-wide.
Right, that's what I was just thinking,
So, there was talk about having an actual public hearing, and I think they said February, Bob, is that what your recollection is?
I can't remember what those.
February or March is an actual public hearing, and my concern is to vet this as much as we can before the actual public hearing. 250 Whalum Road, they did mention that they approved, that the ZBA approved the 125 apartments for Whalum Luxury Apartments. And I think that that's all that I have. Bob, if you wanted to add anything?
Peck,
Meeting on the 28th?
School Committee.
There was a school committee meeting on December 17th. The superintendent was ill, so several of the items had to be tabled because she wasn't there to present. The school committee accepted a donation from the Connor B. Lawrence Memorial Fund for $2,500 to provide scholarships for trips. There's $1,500 going for scholarships for the Washington, D.C. trip and $1,000 for Nature's Classroom. Mr. Launder reported that there is they're trying to get rid of excess property in the modular classrooms. There is one at TCP and one at Turkey Hill. They are 2 classroom sets the district bought in 1997 and used until 2005. They became storage areas after the reorganization of the schools. They've offered it to the town for town use, but the town has not accepted the offer for removal from school grounds. $156,000 was spent for the purchase of these 2 sets of modular classrooms originally. Both are in poor condition, they have deteriorated and have roof leaks. Mr. Launder proposed that they be declared excess and first offered to the town again for their use, then put up for sale.
Just in case you didn't get it right the first time.
Or you offered behind door number 1.
Then put up for sale to the public if the town's not interested. They need to, the foundations need to be removed. Demolition will take place if they can't find a buyer. The Turkey Hill Middle School modular classroom is currently being used for storage, but will need to be disposed of and there's a new storage shed going to be put in that spot. They voted unanimously to approve. I asked during the public comment why they weren't offered for sale earlier, say 9 years earlier. And they felt that they were kept in the event a swing space was needed. The superintendent's contract amendment for FY16 through FY18. She had negotiated a 6-year contract. It is in the 3rd year currently. The raise for this year was 2.5%. The school committee is obligated by January of every year to negotiate. They proposed 3% increase for each of the remaining 3 years of the contract, and they voted unanimously to approve. During public comment, I asked what the teacher salary contract renegotiated last year came out to, and Dr. Berthume said it averaged, when you include everything, including the steps, 2.5% a year for the contract. And they're meeting tomorrow night at Town Hall, and Passios and Brooks House boundaries are going to be discussed, as well as the superintendent's recommended FY16 budget.
Thank you. School Building Committee, so I just want to give the recap of the last, we've been doing, 3-week look-aheads. So the installation of all the concrete footings and foundation walls have been completed. There was some excessive rainy conditions that hampered the completing of the leveling plate and miscellaneous foundation shelf and infill, but that would be picked up as soon as the weather permitted, which it has since this was written back between the holidays. The foundation subcontractor should be demobilizing at the end of this month. Well, actually, the end of last month, the beginning of this month, which is ongoing as the foundation is completed. The electrical underground work for the primary and transformer vaults is ongoing, and the drainage work continues on the east side of the site. The underbuilding slab continues with the grease trap installation and the utility duct banks for electric and plumbing into the building. The structural steel erection of the framework continues on Area A, and that will be followed by the second floor decking, much of which you can see from the street. The bolting and detailing for Area A will be ongoing through the middle of January. The outlook summary, so of the things I have not already mentioned, they're going to be saw cutting, drilling, and epoxying the rebar at the gym north wall. The foundation crew, as I said, will demobilize. Utilities will be started into the building, and the underground plumbing and electrical work will begin in earnest with what they can do with the foundation now in place. The next school building committee meeting is next Wednesday, January 14th at 6:30 PM in room 13 at the Passios Building. And Sewer Commission.
Is meeting on the 27th.
Excellent. Town manager reports.
I have a couple of items for you. The first is a request for signature on a Form 43 for Settlers Pub. The request is to begin Sunday sales at 10 a.m. This is one that they have to fill out the form. The board doesn't have to vote. It's a requirement if a duly licensed business wants to make that request, so I will send that down for your signature to be submitted to the ABCC. The second thing I wanted to mention is over the last 2 weeks, I've talked to a number of very unhappy residents relative to their electric bill. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to mention again that the town does offer an electric aggregation program to residents. Everybody is signed up for it unless you opt out. We have a very high participation rate, over 90%. We offer this program for electric supply when we can offer a rate better than Unitil's basic service rate. The rate that we are currently offering is better than Unitil's basic service rate, but it is significantly higher than what was offered for the prior 6 months. The supply rate that we offer through the program is 13.99 cents per kilowatt hour, which is up from 7.8 cents, which was offered for the prior 6 months. Unitil's current basic service rate is 14.328 cents per kilowatt hour. And I wanted to make mention of this again because people are now seeing their first bill with these new rates. Many people are calling Unitil, and the information I'm getting back from residents is that Unitil is advising people that the increase in their rate is due to the town's municipal electric aggregation program. I've had 3 conversations with the government services rep and advised him that I thought that was a very unfair information to be giving out to people. I don't expect Unitil to be advocating on behalf of the town's program, but there has to be a way to let people know that, yes, the aggregation rate is going up, but Unitil's basic service rate is going up as well. Unitil is saying if people ask, they certainly would say that, and my point is, why would they ask when you're saying that it's because of the town? And I don't think that we're serving residents of the town well, because when somebody talks to one person and they point the finger at the other, and then they call me and I say, explain everything. I had one person say, well, I don't believe anybody. Well, I don't blame him for not believing anybody, right? There has been some concern that people feel that they weren't notified of this significant rate increase. I'm not sure what we do. This is sort of the traditional, how do you notify people? These aren't our bills. We could request that Unitil send something. I don't think that they would do that because that's an added cost to them. We don't have monthly bills that we send out, so it's difficult for us to do that. Could we put something in a quarterly tax bill? Yes, if the timing is right, but the timing doesn't necessarily work out. I did remind people that we've talked about it at this meeting on a number of occasions, that we have at least reporters from at least 2 papers, sometimes 3 at the meetings. I know that there have been stories in both of those papers. We do try to keep information on the website. So it is difficult. I'm sensitive to the very large increase, but it's the best that the town could do, and if we couldn't do better than what Unitil's basic service rate is, we wouldn't offer the program. Unitil has some very good information on their website for anybody who's interested in seeing if they can obtain a better rate through a third-party distributor. If you go on Unitil's website and you look under their winter electric rates, they have a tab that will list all of the third-party suppliers that operate in this area. But that's something that residents would have to do on their own. I wish people much luck. I'm not sure that they could do better than we could do, but that's certainly available, and I know some people have done some research and are looking into that. So these rates are in effect until May 31st of 2015. Sometime in April, we will go out to bid and see if we can do better. And again, we only offer the program if we can do better than Unitil can.
By the way, just on that note, I believe we all knew that the electric generation charges, anybody's electric bill generally falls into two components, the electric generation charge and the electric distribution charge. So the generation charge is what the town has the aggregation plan with. And again, as the town manager says, if we can get a better plan than Unitil can, we go with that, which is what we currently have. But the distribution charge is charged to you for delivering it to your home and all the wires and infrastructure. And I believe that also increased. I have to look back at my bill as well, but I believe it went up. So not only is it not the whole truth that it was because we're on the town's plan. That is clearly not true. Yes, because we're on the aggregation plan, the rates went up and your bill went up. But if you were with Unitil, your bill would have been higher.
Right.
Also, the Unitil-controlled portion of that alone, the distribution part, also went up. So I believe that some people really got hit pretty hard. I believe somewhere between 35 and 50% increases,
50%.
which is, well, I won't even start about Unitil because it's just insane. It's not just Unitil, by the way. It's all the four generation utilities, the electric utilities in the Commonwealth. And another reason, by the way, to pitch to our lawmakers to approve the muni bill and allow people, because this is not true of those municipal electric companies like Princeton and Littleton and those of that nature. So
The last item I wanted to mention is relative to the budget, both the current year budget and the 16 budget. As you all know, the incoming governor is facing a significant budgetary shortfall in fiscal 2015, pegged at $1 billion. I mean, that's the latest that I've heard. Based on what I've heard, I think we will do fine in fiscal 15. I don't expect that there would be any significant cuts to our local aid based on the pledges that the incoming governor is making. My concern would be for fiscal 16 that in years where we've had this happen, where mid-year or later than mid-year the state is reworking its budget, the hits to state agencies and departments tend to be higher, and we pay for it in the following year. So I am concerned that while we may do fine in fiscal 15, that fiscal 16 may be more difficult for us than we would typically see in terms of local aid. One correction I wanted to make when I made the presentation of the financial forecast, I talked about the timing of the release of the governor's budget. Because we have a new governor coming in, he has an additional 30 days to submit his budget, which means instead of submitting it at the end of January, he will submit at the end of February, which means that we shouldn't expect any information on a joint aid resolution until March, which is of little to no value to us. So we will be going through our budget process with the assumptions, with our own local assumptions in terms of what local aid will be, and it will be a little bit tougher than it is in years when we have a sitting governor and the budget comes out in a more timely manner.
And one day I wish that somebody realizes that the whole system is broken. But seemingly, no one seems to. If they do realize it, they don't do anything about it, which is just the equivalent of not realizing it. No appointments, no executive session. Next meeting, next Tuesday, January 13th, right here at 7. Any public comment in closing from the board? Any public comment from the public? Okay, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
Second?
I'm assuming no more discussion, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Good night, everyone. Stay warm.